you so much. And so I think Paul has done most of the work of holding space and of bringing all the ancestors in and allowing us to start our stories. I think storytelling is really powerful. And tonight we are going to talk about the power of story and how it can help us, transition our, our humanity and to be more, to have healing. I think stories also help us with healing. So, and sometimes we do mistake the word healing as if we, we have to heal something that is broken within us or something that is needs to be healed. And some people sometimes shy away from that. But I think the word healing, or why we need healing, is purely for our potential to come, to really tap into that reservoir of potential within us and to become more, to evolve. And for me, honestly, I feel like healing is about evolving ourselves into a better humanity, into the full capacity of who we can become. And it is about becoming, not so much as about fixing something within ourselves. So I am going to start, as I did the last time, with a small activity, and the activity will really allow us to see what it really means to use stories in creating space or holding space for others, but also to use the stories for ourselves, so that we can see the butterfly within, not see our victimhood or the way, the programs that sometimes run within us. So I want each and every one of you, I hope that you have a pen and a paper on hand, and if you don't, it's all right as well. You can listen. I'm not much of a writer at times. I love listening, but this would be really nice, a nice activity to follow through as you write, as you bring the mind into, into paper, and you combine all, your heart and your actions, and it kind of makes it whole. So for a long time, I questioned my role as a storyteller, because I started telling stories actually at a place of victimhood. And I realized at that place that I felt I wasn't giving much to my audiences, but I was also feeling that there was something wrong with my way of, with the way I shared stories. And honestly, when I started to be on stage, I don't think I was ready. I was just sort of like, something in me pushed me in, and I just wanted people to know who I am, and I wanted to share. And it was a force that was really coming from within me. So at that stage, I started telling stories, and then from that place of victimhood, I graduated into anger, and then I told it from a phase of anger, a phase where I felt that I had to, as an activist, like very angry. And then there was a third phase where I was sort of like a savior. And I feel like these three phases were sort of a dramatic phase. It's the drama in us. It's like, or poor me, or, when you're telling it from the place of victimhood, it's poor me. But when you're telling it from the anger, it's you blame other people. And when you're telling it from the place of savior, you want to save other people. And in a way that is running away from your own problems. So later on, I discovered that, there is a better way to tell our stories than this three triangle of drama. So we will go, we will delve into that later on. But as a teller, I felt that, oh my God, I can't keep telling my stories. And then one morning I was meditating. I have a very beautiful ritual given to me by I am of the Islamic faith. So from my faith, we have early morning prayers, and after prayers, I do a bit of meditation, a bit of quiet and listening to the mind. And so as I've questioned myself, I can't do this anymore. I had a revelation. I usually don't see things. I am a person who feels, but this time I saw a cross, and I didn't know what that meant. And what it translated for me later on in reflection was that the first, I want you to write a vertical line, And at the top of the vertical line, you write the teller. And I felt that that was who I was as a teller. And then at the bottom is the listener. And I want you to write a vertical line. And on the vertical line, I want you on the left to put the past or an elders. And on the right of that horizontal line, I want you to put the youth or the future. So in my revelation, I realized that as a teller, and I had an audience, which are listeners, and the stories that I was telling were the stories of my lived experience, of my cultural ancestry, and I was sharing it with my audience. But I also realized that in this present moment, I was also using this moment to tell a story for our future generations. And so at the center and the intersection of these two lines is where the story really lies. And what came apparent for me in this setting is the fact that I was shown that this story is actually not my story, and it's not your story. It's not our ancestors' story, and it's not our future generations' story. It is our story. And I think with that little bit of revelation, imagine how, kind of a heaviness has been, lifted off me, lifted off my shoulder, that what I was carrying is not just my story. It was a sharing, it is a collective story. And now we know that this is our collective story. And especially now in the pandemic of COVID-19, we are more than ever understanding the power of this story. And in our African heritage, we say that, cultures who don't tell stories die out. So when we don't share these stories, we literally die out. We cease to exist. And we know that through death, because when someone, dies, then it's done, their life is gone, and their stories sometimes stop with that. But we also know that stories are a continuation of life. So we also don't believe in death. We do believe that there is a continuation of life. And through our stories, our elders, become alive. And hence the importance of, when we're holding space, it's very important to acknowledge our elders, and past and present, and to bring them into this space, because they do exist in spirit. They are not gone. They are here with us. We are talking when we, their DNA, scientifically, their DNA is in us. And the power of this is also that when you realize the power of storytelling, and you see at that intersection, literally that's where the heart of matter is, and we are matter. So that's where, if you are not owning your story, an ancestor who had a grudge against someone might occupy that space for you, and they might take on your life. So, sometimes, we are an oral culture, and we're very big in poetry. And sometimes I hear young people bringing in poetry, and they channel that, but sometimes they talk of heavy stuff that they have not even lived as an experience, but they bring it through, through channel. And, sometimes I talk to these young people and I say, you have to be careful with the stories you tell, because the words we speak have, importance, but they are also very heavy, and you can use them for, for good, or you can use them for bad. So whenever you're telling the stories, you have to analyze the story. Why am I telling this story? What is its significance? How can I, is it helping people, or is it diminishing the human dignity? So we have to be careful in terms of the way we tell our stories. And in the elderly space, if you really look at it, we have elders sometimes, and sometimes we only have old people who haven't really grown, and they haven't, brought the wisdom of the elderly. And in the space of the youth as well, we have youth who are pioneers, who can change the future and who can step into their story and say, well, this is what my ancestors lived, but this is not what I have to live. I can change the world. And we have great pioneers in the young people, but they can also be procrastinators, or they can be people who just persist with or just live in the story of the ancestry. And hence they lose their opportunity to tap into their potential. So storytelling is important in the way that it is a deep reservoir of our collective truths. And, you know, I want you now to really put a circle into the two lines now, the vertical and the horizontal. And once we put a circle in that, we are then closing our gap today. That's the bubble that we're in. That's our world. And we might live in the same earth, but we all have stories. We all have our own bubbles, our own worlds. And every story is a world in its own. And hence why communication is really, you know, very difficult, because the way we perceive and the way, you know, our minds, where our minds are at, might not be the same place. And the way we see, the lens with which we see through the world is different. And so, and especially when it comes to culture, we have different cultural upbringing, and culture is a currency. So we do trade with culture. And when we are using story in that way, we can, you know, dignify each other by, you know, loving each other and listening to each other, or we can, you know, be unkind to each other and commit atrocities amongst one another. So that's our duality as human beings. We haven't yet transcended this dual our ability. But I feel that these times that we're living now, we are starting to become more. And by sharing these stories and by just really remembering the wisdom that lives within us, we can, you know, go very far. So tonight, last time, I know that I gave an acronym of trust. I used trust as an acronym, and I gave it as a tool to support others, and it was a gift from me to, you know, for you to take away. And tonight, the gift that I want for you to take away, and I will be discussing later on, is the gift of love. And love is an acronym for me as well. So I love Rumi. I love Rumi's poetry, and Rumi says, "Do not look for love. Just look for the spaces that you withhold it. And let what you do, let what you love be what you do." And I think that, you know, and this is just paraphrasing, it might be in a different way, but that's exactly, you know, kind of what, you know, the content of that quote was. And I love this quote because, you know, I've realized that within my journey, love is something that we're made of. We are love. And by connecting with it, by just, because we do feel it every now and again, but I think there's a tendency and a resistance to love because we have been programmed otherwise. We have been programmed with fear. And that fear sort of, you know, blocks our ability to love each other. And especially, I think, humanity, especially in my culture, I don't think that we've been given the opportunity or taught how to love. I come from the sub-Saharan deserts of Africa, and that's where actually my both parents were from. They were both from the nomadic ancestry, and they lived a nomadic life. And as you know, nomadic life is a very hard life and very hardship. And I am one of 12 children to my mother. She lost 3 children. She had 9. So I was the second youngest. And so you could understand the stinginess of love in that, you know. And I realized that all my life and in the journey, I was always looking for love, maybe even in the wrong places. And so I think that the power of love can save us today. I don't, can really allow us to move forward in our humanity. And my acronym for love is a very simple acronym. I realized for a long time that the power of listening is what we miss in many conversations, in many communication. So the first letter of love is to listen deeply. So when you're listening, and you're listening in a deep way, listening doesn't just only mean with ears, although we do have two ears, and it's, you know, it is for a good reason to hear things. But I think listening vibrationally, listening to each other in, you know, in the way of communication. When someone comes to you and they tell you something, do they mean what they're saying? What do they mean by that? You know, and in our culture, because it was a very hard culture and people were really actually very dignified in their way of asking, they didn't ask for much. And so when someone came, you know, to them who would have walked maybe 3 or 5 days to just be in their community, they would know what that person was asking for. That person didn't have to say, I need this and this, I'm hungry, or my family doesn't have much. He would tell a story. And so that story would be in riddles. And the host had to really unpack that riddle. He needed to understand what this person was telling them so that they can be able to support. Sometimes they needed something that they would take back to their family, but sometimes they also needed some wisdom. So they would ask for something. So there is a beautiful story that my mother once upon a time shared with us. And the story was about a man who had 3 sons, and he was on his deathbed. And he told his sons, I am dying. And the power and beauty in our culture is that people actually knew their time. When their time came, they knew it was not just a sickness, or they were feeling, you know, they knew that they were going back home. So he said, you know, I am going back, and I know that, you know, I have 2 of you are my sons and can inherit me. And but in the Islamic culture, or in our traditions, you only biological children could inherit the father. So he said, you 2 of you would inherit me, but 1 of you is not my biological son. And you have to find out through. So he sent them to a man in a certain village. And he said, you have to go to so and so, and he will let you know who is not my biological son. And so when the father died and they buried him, so the 3 men went and took the journey. It was a journey of about 4 or 5 days. And by the time they reached, it was an evening. So the man said, look, we don't, you know, you've come at a bad time. We don't have anything you can eat at the moment. But he put each and every one of them different places to sleep. And he said, in the morning, we will slaughter something for you, you know, an animal, and then you will have something to eat. So in the middle of the night, the elder, you know, woke up his wife, and they made some, you know, some food. And he decided to wake the men one at a time. So he went to each different place that each man was at and asked them to eat. So 2 of the men said, no, we came through the same journey. So he would tell them, he would tell each one, oh, this is the little bit that we have. It's not enough for everyone. Just have this by yourself. And 2 of the men said, no, we've come through the same journey. and we can't eat by ourselves. We will all eat together at night, in the morning. So they refused to have the food, or they would say, so and so was worse than me, give it to him. And one of them ate the food by himself. So in the morning, the wise man translated for them and said, so and so is not your biological brother. The moral or the beauty in that story is that we would never know if that was the biological son or not, but it showed that whoever shares a meal with you, or whoever has their heart connected to yours, is your brother. And so that is how, stories were used in our culture. So people would go to wise people, and if they were struggling with something in their lives, they would ask. And I think in today's world, we call them mentors. You would find a mentor or a coach to support you in that. So that was the power of stories in our traditions. And so storytelling was a tool that was used not only for, for celebrations, but it was used for, for healing, bringing the community together if there was a problem, and telling stories. It was also used for education, because we are an oral culture and we use memory. We were taught to, connect with stories, and to be able to really relay these stories to other generations. And so it became like you pass it on as a relay. And so, especially women were the best storytellers in our cultural context, because they were the women who, who passed on to the children. And in our tradition, there's something called the brambur. Brambur means, it's sort of a music, but it's also a poetry, which the mother gifts her daughter when she gets married. So she would be speaking to her daughter, but also on other parts, she would be speaking to the family that the daughter is getting married to. And we do believe that, marriage wasn't just between two people. It was between a whole, the whole family. So through that brambur, she would, have some connecting riddles that she talks to the in-laws to treat her daughter well. And she would also be talking to the daughter to treat her husband well, or to treat the friend, the others well. So this is how our oral traditions were. The Somali language actually wasn't written until 1972. So that is how, we are very oral culture. And so when I came to Australia, I started telling stories, and I think it really served me really well. And I do believe that strengthening a community starts with storytelling. It starts in the power in which we share our stories. How do we share our stories, and how important it is? And even our political leaders, or even leaders in business, if they are very good storytellers, I think they have the ability and the opportunity to transform communities. And I think it is in our hands today especially I do talk mostly to the women in many communities, that it is important for mothers, for women, to be able to for their voices to be heard. The war that is going out into the world today, I feel, is a war that is harbored in women's hearts. There has been, the patriarchy has caused a lot of injustice and imbalance in passing on the stories. And I think that imbalance and injustice can be brought back, and it can only be done when women own their power, because our personal power, our identity, our crucial, ability to design our world is in our story. And the minute we own our story, we own our ability to design our destiny. So we have to be the molders and the shapers of this story. And I think that, you know, as a collective now, we also have to let go of the stories of our ancestors. We've got a lot of guilt, we have a lot of shame, we have a lot that when we look back into history that we see. And these things are they disturb us so much. And the minute we are in guilt, we are in heavy energy, we are in darkness. So we can bring the light by bringing joy into our communities through the power of storytelling. So within each and every one of us lives an incredible story, a story that comes from our lived experience, from the triumphs of our adversities, and from the daily joys of our lives. And the minute we start sharing these powerful stories, we create a robust and resourceful community. And this is what's calling us in these times. So I am going to allow a little bit into, you know, a bit of interaction and asking questions. And then we will go to the second letter of love, which is observe with no judgment. And I hope that you have been listening deeply. That's what we are, you know, we mirror for each other. So the minute you mirror someone's dignity, they see it. And I think that's called the permission slip. You sort of give someone that permission slip to be more and to act better. And I think in communities, you know, one of powerful story that I remember one time at, you know, I went to a library here in Brighton. I live in Brighton East in Melbourne. And I parked my car really not in a proper way, but just in a random, because I was just wanted to put the books, you know, I was dropping off the books and the place was very near to me. So I parked very awkwardly and just ran out of the car and put the books in. And when I came back, an elder came by and he said, "What are you doing?" You know, he just gave me a piece of his mind and said, "What are you doing?" And, you know, packing like this. And so I said, "Thank you," left. And in my heart, I felt very angry. I was like, who did he think he was? And so the ego mind started talking. And after a few, you know, meters, I realized that that elder was actually looking out for me, you know, why he was letting me know that I did something wrong. And I think my heritage kicked in because our elders are the wisdom of the community. They tell us what is wrong and they have the right to tell us. And I think we at these times have lost that. We've lost the ability to really tell each other what is not, you know, what is not right. And so I felt validated really when he, you know, when someone tells you, whether it tells you in a good way or in a bad way, it's like he's validating that you're there and you've made a mistake. So correct your mistake. And I think that is sort of now kind of lost in our communities, in the Western communities. It's still back in Africa. Everybody is, you know, tells you how it is. So it's really important to validate each other and to value each other's, you know, importance and worth. So listen deeply, observe with no judgment, and validate. So what are we listening to, observing and validating? So the letter E is a triple E. So I call it, you validate and listen and observe the ego, because the ego is the storyteller. The ego is the narrator. That voice in the head is our inner child that has been wronged again and again and again. And it tells you what is wrong with the world because of what it knows. It doesn't know what's coming. It doesn't know. It just knows the program. It knows what has happened. And so the ego needs, when you listen deeply and observe with no judgment and validate the ego, it sort of stops you stop it on its track and you're telling it, yep, I hear you. but this time we can do it better. This time we can, and so in that space, I think you have the ability to change the narrative because you're listening, you're not running away. And most often what we do is we numb the ego. We run away from the grievances or from the hardships that have happened. The other one is the emotion. So the emotion is also a very important, the emotion usually lives in the heart. The emotion is the grief and the grace within our hearts. And we do have the ability to transform grief into grace through this powerful listening and observing and validating process. And the last one, if we can catch the emotion before, because the emotion is the fastest space of manifestation. If you feel anger and you listen deeply, you observe and you validate that anger, then it will allow you, or let you know where that anger has come from. It might not even be related to what you think. So if that anger, you've known it in time, it doesn't have to come into physicality. It doesn't have to manifest into a tangible anger that you sort of, mislead someone or behave against someone in a bad way. Just like my story of having that anger, but when I went to the source, I realized that actually my anger was out of, my own ego. So it's important to do that. But even, when we look at, if someone comes at you really angry and you do give them that space of listening, observing with no judgment and validating their anger, what happens is you have actually dismantled that anger. They will look at you and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be angry, because they feel it. This is an energy exchange. So if you're honest about your listening and observation and validation, then this person feels it too. So we have the power to dismantle so many conversations that might have gone in a different direction. We do have the power to bring them back and to really change that conversation into a meaningful one. And the last one is experience. So the emotion, when caught in a, before it becomes an experience, then we do have that ability. So, and even when the experience happens, if we can listen deeply, observe with no judgment, and validate that experience, we don't have to repeat it again. If it was an experience that we didn't like, that something really bad came out of it, so you don't have to do it again, so we learn through that. So love is actually the way in which we can change ourselves. And what I know for sure is that we have actually missed the marker for the self-love. We haven't been taught how to love ourselves. And I think when emotions like guilt and shame and things like that come up for us, we do not have the ability, to really connect with these emotions. We really don't like them that much. And most often we miss where that has come from. We miss what this particular story is telling us. And hence the growth in ourselves, we don't grow spiritually. We don't have maturity. So we will always be just, someone else is doing something to us, or the world is doing this to us. So once we learn this ability to love, then I think that's where we can transcend into the triangle of empowerment. Because I did talk about the triangle of drama, where, we're either functioning from a place of depression and victimhood, or we are, going up through anger and blaming other people, or we want to save the world or save other people. So the triangle of empowerment is actually a triangle of triple C's. The first C is we learn to challenge ourselves. Once we become good listeners and observers and validators, we start to really know that my experience is not just here randomly. This experience has happened because something in me is not going right. So I have to change, you know, I have to change myself in order for my experiences to change. And the second one is we become better coaches. We coach ourselves, or we affirm the things that we want in our lives. We learn to be, to learn from our mistakes. So we understand that, we become a coach. And the third one is we become creators. We are creators of our lives. We take full responsibility of who we want to be. And I think the minute you enter that triangle of empowerment, your life tremendously changes. Your life changes. And when your life changes, your home life changes. You know, the people around you change. And then the community around you changes. And so you see the whole world transforms because you've transformed the world within yourself. And once that world within yourself is transformed, it means that now I'm living on purpose. Now I'm living in a world where I am the creator. I'm the one who takes responsibility for what is happening. And then I think the worlds around you can start changing, because you start to become a truth teller, and then you can start to advocate for resilience. You start to advocate for supporting and being in service to humanity and to growth and to healing. So a lot of things change when you start to take that full responsibility. And on this note, Paul, how are we going for time and for...
I think, well, I'm frantically writing notes from all of the amazing things that are being said, Mariam. I love that idea of moving from, or being the creator of your own life and taking the power and also the responsibility to change your future, but also to change the community's future. So I think that's amazing. Yes. I can see lots of people reaching for papers and pens and scribbling down notes.
Yeah, and you know what, Paul, I want everybody to take, you know, the triangles can be done with, do you know that we had the activity we did? So there is the horizontal line. So the downward, you can put a triangle from that, create a triangle from facing downwards. And then try another triangle facing upwards into, you know, the horizontal line. And so the down triangle can be our drama triangle, and the upper one can be our empowered triangle. And they can be in the same bubble in our world. So I think that's our world, isn't it? It's really very, we can see it. And you know, both triangles are the diamond. And I think the diamond, when it's in the rough, it is in the drama. And when we can shine it ourselves, and it can become in the upper triangle of empowerment.
As a bit of a maths teacher, I love a polygon to go with storytelling. So, you know, that's just everything that I possibly could need.
It's every 10 years, something incredible happens. And this is, with COVID now, I also went through a divorce last year, and then my children are an empty nester as well. So that's again, you know, you kind of find yourself again in the, you know, in that quicksand of being a victim again, and anger, and, you know, while you're dealing with these emotions that come up for you to transition into the next phase. So I'm not sure what my next phase is going to be, but I'm definitely I'm transitioning into that another phase, into becoming, you know, a woman. For a long time, I think I've been wearing the hat of being a mother and a wife. And so now without those two hats, what does my life look like? So this is actually a chance, this is that barzakh is talked about in the Quran as the place of acclimatization. It said that the two seas, it talks about the two seas, which have the salty water sea and the ocean, the freshwater sea. It was where they meet. When the two fish, like when one fish wants to come out of the salty water and transition into the fresh water, it has to go through this barzakh, and it's called the in-between world, and to acclimatize so that it can start that new life into the freshwater ocean. And vice versa, if the freshwater ocean fish wants to come to the salty water space. So, and it's also about, I think, in the womb, when the child is coming out from mom's, from the mother's womb becomes the barzakh, the space of the in-between. So I think, and it's the human growth, we go through that in-between as well. So it's how we transition into the next phase of our lives. And so these two triangles, I think, will coexist because it's the duality, it's who we are as humans on earth. And we will always be feeling. But once I think you get and you understand the victimhood, the anger, and the savior, then you do know that you can get out of it. You don't get caught in that trap. So you have choices.
And what was the other triangle? That wasn't
the other
allowed.
triangle is the one that is pointing upwards, and it's the empowered triangle. It's called the empowered. So so one corner of it is you become a challenger. You challenge yourself. You don't see yourself as a victim. And the second C is you coach. You become a coach.
Yeah.
And then the third one is a creator. You become a creator.
Okay. Yeah, there's 3 C's. Yeah.
Yeah, the 3 C's.
Sure.
And actually, these are not, these are, I think they do exist, these triangles. Other people talk about them. But I just feel that, for me, when I saw that story and my own story, I knew that I was in these 3 phases. And then I knew that I was, beyond these phases, and I would see as the drama. I became actually a really powerful listener after I understood these phases, because you will, when people come into your vicinity, when you start to interact with people, the phase they're at. When someone is a victim, when someone is angry, and when someone is a savior. So you kind of understand how to even interact with them, because sometimes we can be telling people something, or we can be teaching. I'm a life coach now, and I support a lot of women to transition their stories and to go through what their life preferences. And I do that through the power of storytelling, just what I'm doing with you here. But I also support, I do coaching as well, 101. And then I do like holding that space. You can allow people to be who they are. Some people don't want to get out of that. And sometimes it's because they haven't got the lesson. They haven't got the, the story is not reformed yet. The story is not complete yet. So to speak in the language of gardening, the seed hasn't germinated or hasn't come alive. So you can have compassion for people in that space and allow them to just transition and to go through that. And I think there are some people who are really powerful space holders. And when they reflect for you, your seed, they have the power to germinate your seed, so to speak. And so I think it's really a powerful thing. And one thing that I would really love for all of you is to really take this love, the power of love, and use it for yourselves. Use it when, listen to whatever emotion or whatever, become those observers, and you will see how your life transforms and changes. And it's really powerful. Before you use it for anyone, it's important to use it for ourselves. Okay, so now what we are going to do with Paul is maybe go to rooms and discuss and have a bit of discussions, making sense of the world that is about to emerge. There is pain. It is exactly like a mother who is going through, having a baby. There is, and I think in that space we need a midwife as well. We need space holders, someone who can transition us. So if you're not able to do it alone, yes, it's important to find, someone that can support you in this space. But if you can really sit and listen and be quiet, I think it's a space that will give you that pain, but will also allow you to really transition well, because all that it needs, this space needs quiet. It needs the power to connect. And yeah, I think, this is a powerful tool to use for that connection, and to remember that you are more than what, just your humanity. You have to bring your other part of yourself, which is your spiritual self. And, for a long time, we've been separated through the dogma of religion, and taught that, a certain religion has the truth and it's the only truth. But in our world today, we are starting to realize that this truth actually does not even need a religion. This truth has always lived within us, and that God, which I think we have really done injustice to that name. So many people, you mentioned God today, and, a lot of atrocities has been committed in the name of God, that we have problems with even that. But we know that there is a source that we all have come from. And, we may call that God, or we may call that Allah, or we may call it in whichever language or whichever way we feel. But that feeling and that, livelihood is within us. So story is important, but also the story of creation is also important. The story of connecting to our spiritual selves, the story of connecting to the earth as a story, as a mother, and allowing that the earth to inform us, to allow us to see what happens. For me, I use that as in gardening. So the project that I do in my backyard, RAW actually stands for Resilient Aspiring Women. It's a not-for-profit organization. Our mission and our vision is actually to transform our communities through compassionate conversations, and to seed love in our communities. And so I use earth. For me, my calling has been through earth. And I have remembered myself as a young girl, walking in tall. I grew up in a very native culture called the Giriama in Kenya. And they had their small plots of land, and they cultivated the land. So for them, the land was their God. The land was where their livelihood came from. The land was everything to them. They were sort of like pagans. They didn't have any religion, but they really earth people. And as a child, I was never taught, this is what you have to do for the earth, you have to look at the climate change and that, but you just lived it. It was a living experience that I had. For them, it was when, there were rituals for sowing seeds in the ground. There were rituals when we harvested. There were songs that they invented for, for harvesting and for seeding. So when I came to Australia, and in the midst of, my turmoil, I reconnected to the earth. I did a permaculture course. Just, we call these things, coincidence or accidental, but nothing is actually accidental. Nothing is coincidence. Everywhere we occupy in our, in our world, wherever we're called to, any space, like where we are tonight, this is not random. We are here because of choice. Even if you were invited by a friend, it is because you took that invitation and you came. And hence, there is nothing coincidental that happens. Everything is happens in, in due time. So for me, I was called through permaculture. I did a permaculture course for 8 weeks, and then I found a beautiful permaculture designer. And at the time, I just wanted to work with women. I knew that I was working with refugees. I was an interpreter. I worked in communities, and I could see the turmoil that was happening in our, our communities. So my calling was to connect with people. And then I was also invited to connect with the earth. And when the two met, one thing, a quote that my mother used often came into, germination for me. It was the seed that allowed me to open my backyard as a community garden. And she always used to tell us, if you can host someone in your heart, you can host them in your home. And by that, she meant forgiveness. When a lot of bad things happen to you and people some injustices happen, then you can forgive them, and then you can invite them back into your home. So when I came to Australia, yes, a lot of assumptions were made about myself and my family. The community that I came into did not know much about my culture. And as I said before, culture is a currency. I wasn't trading well. And even with the culture of the community that I have come into, given that culture, it is a currency that you don't even know how to use. So I was making mistakes, they were making mistakes. And yeah, so there was a lot of assumptions and a lot of, things committed against each other. So I had to let go of that. I had to make, once I accepted Brighton to be my community, I wanted to really belong in this community. And hence why my work is where my work started, working in community centers, working in Brighton homes, and now opening my backyard as a community garden. And the community garden has evolved. It is open for 8 years now. We do a lot of workshops. We do storytelling workshops. We do cooking classes. We do something called Raw Connections, which is about healing and, different modalities of healing. And we invite, speakers, we invite people who have a story to tell, and then we hold that space for them. So the place became, I became a placeholder or a space holder. And, I wanted to contribute to the community that I lived in. And what happened through that simple, decision-making or intentional going forward with my act of, creating a community garden in my home, I gained trust of my community, and I gained also family beyond blood relation. So that is, it was a simple seed that germinated in my backyard, and it's now doing incredible work. And I have other business, like I do my own speaking and coaching and all that, but I never ever mentioned that a lot. I am so proud of the Raw project. I love the Raw project because it's a very inclusive project, and we're now moving away from grassroots because we are all by volunteers. For 8 years, we've never employed anyone. It's all run by volunteers. We've got about 40 fruit trees. Our fence is actually an olive tree, 6 olive trees. And the olive tree in the Quran is mentioned as a tree of neither the east nor the west. It is a bridging tree. And so I realized in this journey that I am a bridger, that I bring close different cultures and holding space and, celebrate diversity. So the more we celebrate diversity and we bring our stories together, I think the more our communities prosper. And so that is my work, and this is the work that I am sharing with you and allowing you to understand that, the minute you want to do something, you are beyond this humanness, this limitedness, these programs that are running in your head. You are so much more wider and so much more than what you think. So the work, I think, post-COVID for us all will be, the collective work will be to transform our communities into the love and trust and connection. And I think that is almost like done for us in the work of the pandemic. But for us to rebuild, we need to be able to really bring those, these tools of trusting and loving and connecting with each other. So I feel that, I feel that we are very lucky, and we are living in these times because we have chosen to. And it is a time, it is a very important time where the history of our stories, the whole stories is really changing. It's not only his story now, but it is also her story. So I think we are rewriting now. We are bringing his and her story together. And, women's power is very important in this space. And for us to really connect to that and to bring the leadership of women, because the leadership of women is the one that will bring back compassion to our earth. And so let's work like a bee. The analogy of a bee is, a bee's life is only 3 months. And in those 3 months, it never ever thinks about, I am going to die in 3 months. What it does is it always looks for the most beautiful flower. And its work is to wake up every morning and visit to that flower. And it never thinks of, pollinating our crops as a duty. It never thinks of giving us honey as its duty. Its work and what it loves and it's inherently here for is to just visit that beautiful flower and that nectar. And the honey and the polarization of our crops, pollination happens as a byproduct. And so I think our work is now transforming into that of a bee. Let's do what we love so that what we give to our communities becomes a byproduct and not a duty that we have to perform. So thank you so much for listening. And I think that on that note, I know that the time is almost here, and I will give it to Paul and anyone who wants to ask questions.
Well, I was actually going to quickly do some rapid fire questions because there's a couple of questions that have come up in the chat window. I thought maybe we can have quick 1 minute answers, which was going to be tough given the questions that have been asked. So one of the questions was, can you speak a little bit more about the notion of a savior, about what the being of the savior is, which I know is how you do that in a short period. I don't know, but that's one of the questions.
Okay, the notion of a savior is a helper. I don't like the word help. Humanity does not need help. And I know as a mother of 5, I have children, and the minute a child is born, they literally know where to look for. They will look for your breast for milk. They know how to do that. And, when a child is starting to walk, if you look at it and it falls, and you say, it looks at the mother. And when the mother says, oh my God, and they detect a certain, energy about you or fear, they will cry. But if you say, whoa, that was a big jump, and you really mean it, the child stands up and walks again. So I know that we want to help each other, but help isn't necessary. People only need support. We have everything equipped within us to be able to do what we need. So there is a lot of resilience. Help, I feel, creates helplessness. And when we are saving, or we feel that we're saving someone, we are actually not empowering that person with the right energy. We are telling them that they lack something, that we need to help them so that they can be something else. So I think it's just supporting each other with the right energy. and dignifying one another, and seeing what you want the person, what do you envision for that person, or what do you see as their potential. And I think it's just the story of Christ having said, you know, just like, you know, he did not see your illness, he saw your wellness. And so it's to see the wellness in others and not see their, you know, their, what they lack.
Fantastic. What a great, that is amazing. That is an amazing answer given 2 minutes. Are there any other questions just quickly? I'm sure there are a million.